applause is appropriate. So thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you for the people following us live on the internet. This is going to start sharp here in a few minutes. One thing I'd like to say that Ford's been asking me to, or trying to remind me of, is that we have a Instagram, or not Instagram, a Twitter feed. I'm sorry, my social media is not so good. But we have a Twitter feed. If you have questions, please send them to Twitter, and they will take them for the later on in the evening for the question and answer session. So, Designing Innovation is presented by the Industrial Designers Society of America and Ford, with media coverage by Core 77. I'm Brendan Warren. I'm the chapter chair of the San Francisco IDSA. And the IDSA in San Francisco is a 100% volunteer-led nonprofit with the mission to advance and inspire design throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. Our local reach extends to product designers, researchers, trend forecasters, interaction designers, engineers, prototypers, CMS specialists, CAD modelers, design strategists, and creative leads. The IDSA members are responsible for designing some of the world's most notable objects and experiences that blur the line between fashion, culture, and industry. Tonight's event will be a moderated conversation between several respected speakers on the topics of design, sustainability, and technology in the product and automotive industries. We are very excited to have this caliber of guests tonight, as they are leaders in their respective fields of product, transportation, technology, and experience. In addition, for the people that are here in San Francisco, Ford has on display the new aluminum F-150 and the C-Max Energy electric concept vehicle that was debuted this year at CES. So I'd like to start the event tonight by introducing Nathan Shedroff. Nathan, who will be moderating the event tonight, chairs a total of 3 MBA programs at the California College of the Arts in San Francisco, an MBA in Public Policy Design, an MBA in Strategic Foresight, and an MBA in Design Strategy. Nathan is also known as one of the pioneers in the field of experience design. He teaches and speaks internationally and has written several books on the topics of experience design, interface design, and sustainability. And we thought there'd be no one better qualified tonight to lead a panel discussion on these topics. So with that, I'd like to give the microphone over to Nathan and start the event.
Hi, everyone. One of the things that Brendan didn't mention, which is not in my bio, is that I am actually a car guy at heart. I have a car design degree from Art Center College of Design down in Pasadena, which is the alma mater of both Freeman and Yves as well. So I get my car on tonight. I'm really excited about that. I want to thank Brandon and the IDSA for setting this up, and also Ford for bringing these a couple prototypes and an actual production car. The C-Max Energies and the new F-150, which you'll be able to mostly touch and maybe sit in if you want afterwards. And we are, like Brandon said, we're streaming live via Core 77, so thank you, Core 77, for making this available to more people around the world than just here in San Francisco. The first person I wanted to introduce, I'm going to make these really quick so we can get the discussion, because that's really the meat of these, why we're here tonight, is Freeman Thomas. Freeman Thomas, and he's here, he brought his cars with him, his latest cars. This is an incredibly accomplished car designer who's now more than just a designer, but now managing a huge studio down in Irvine for Ford. But his career spans Porsche and VW, Audi, Chrysler, Mercedes, Daimler-Benz, Chrysler, and now Ford. So he's seen and touched a tremendous amount of the international automobile industry, and as a designer has made his way through all those pieces, processes, and studios. You would know many of the cars that he's responsible for, but specifically the Audi TT, the new Beetle, not the Chrysler Pacifica as his Wikipedia page says. I got screwed up for that one. But also the Chrysler 300, the sedan, which he described as bringing back the American sedan that, the country was known, the automobile industry was known for here in the United States. So please welcome Freeman Thomas. I also want to introduce Yves Béhar, which someone who probably needs no introduction here in San Francisco, because he's a sort of local guy. Didn't grow up here, but very much founded his company Fuseproject here in Chinatown, as I remember. Now they've just moved into new digs last year in Potrero Hill, just around the corner from CCA. And as many of you know, especially if you're involved with the IDSA or you're part of product design, you know his name from just so many products. It's almost impossible to choose which ones you want to pin on him at any moment. But recently, the sail chair, the leaf lamp for Herman Miller, anything from SodaStream or Jawbone, but especially the up bracelet and the jam boxes. Also an Art Center alum, not a trans guy, but a car guy still, I think, at heart. He said he's got his nice collection. He's a car guy in the sense of the cars that he buys and uses in his everyday life. And he's a proud papa for the third time 8 days ago. So if he nods off, we'll cut him some slack. Please welcome Yves Béhar. And our last panelist is Jordan Brandt from Autodesk. He's new to Autodesk. He's new to San Francisco. He's a Kansan that went to New York and I think Boston before that. And he's at Autodesk. He's a technology futurist, which always sounds like a weird kind of title. Like, what does that? I'm sure your mother is still trying to figure out what it is that you actually do. And it's a job that is incredibly important, not just to a company like Autodesk, but here in the Bay Area where technology is constantly evolving. He got to Autodesk through a startup company that he grew in New York and sold to Autodesk right as they were ramping up into their Series A financing. So he's also an entrepreneur at heart. He knows the startup world, which is also very much indigenous to this part of the country too. So welcome, Jordan Brandt. And we can get started. I was going to start with just a couple, I guess, canned questions, things that I've wanted to ask these guys. But you can ask questions as well if you want to get on the Twitter stream, like Brandon said, or anyone that's watching on the live stream from Core 77, you can tweet your questions, and then someone will bring them up to me, and we'll try to make it as interactive as possible. But I'm going to start things off, and because we have these cars here, the C-Max Energy, both the production and the new concept here, and the all-aluminum bodied F-150, these are cars that have essentially a sustainability component or a sustainability theme in their development, especially the concept. And so I wanted to talk to all three of you because I know that each of you works in a company where sustainability is important and it is strategic. And I wanted to ask you right off the bat, how does sustainability show up in the strategy of the decisions that get made within your companies on projects or when it comes to evaluating new materials or technologies or processes? Anyone?
Well, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. I can start because they're both Fords, and I can give you a little bit of background. You look at both of these vehicles. You look at the C-Max Energy Solar, and you look at the new 2015 F-150. They're very different vehicles, and as we start to develop a vehicle, we start to look at it from a lot of different points of view. But efficiency, lightweight, aerodynamics, all of that, as different as those two vehicles are, they have very much the same goal in mind, to be the best in their class. You look at the new F-150, and the whole body is made out of military-grade aluminum. That is a huge deal. 700 pounds of weight taken out of that vehicle from the previous F-150. And that really, and it's larger. It's actually a little bit wider than the current truck. So to do a bold move like that and make it more efficient, make it more aerodynamic, make it better in every single way than the previous truck is a goal. And same thing with the C-Max. The C-Max is a car that, for Americans, it's an unusual type of a car to see in America. And here's a big car company, global, that made a bold move and said, we're going to start bringing our European products to the market over here because these products do the very best at what they do, and they've already been proven in Europe to do that. So that's really sort of, we can get into a lot of granularity to that, but that's a big picture of it.
What changed within Ford that's allowing these kinds of cars to be explored right now?
Well, it really goes back to 2005. And in 2005, first Mark Fields came back and started this thing called Way Forward. And then Alan Mulally joined. And then Alan basically went into the 14th floor of World Headquarters and asked them, I want to see all the plans for, here's a guy coming out of Boeing. And I want to see all the plans for everything that's going on in the Ford world. And he looked at it and he said, we've got 7 different car companies that we're doing and under the Ford brand. We need to do one. And that's what changed. He did this whole One Ford strategy, which is still what's in place right now, and still, with Mark taking over now, because he was part of that initial architecture of that plan. So that's the big change, and that's where everybody's working globally as one.
Yves, you've done several products now that fall under a sustainability rubric. How important is that in your choice of who you want to work with or what kinds of products you work on?
So can you hear me? Yeah. So for us, sustainability is not something that we separate as a different practice. We're not so much specialized in it, but at the same time, I believe that every project, when we're successful, when sustainability is a successful practice, as a designer, it's just a tool. And it's a tool to make things better in ways that sometimes you can advertise, like a car that has a solar roof right here. But sometimes you don't even have to advertise it at all. It's invisible, meaning you've done a few things in there that improve the product's weight or its performance or the materials that are being used, and that's really invisible to the user. I think we want to move to a stage where design and sustainability aren't two separate fields. So for example, on the sail chair, we really made a product that's 30% lighter than all other task chairs, that is made of like a smaller number of parts, that got rid of framing, for example, of the backrest. But we don't. But when you look at it, when it's in an office, you go, wow, that's an exciting, discreet, transparent chair that's right for the time. You don't go, well, that must be something that's about sustainability because of the way it looks, because it's brownish or it looks recycled or anything like that. So, I think it really sort of takes place in every single one of our projects, but quite often in more discrete ways than is traditional.
I think of the SodaStream as an example of that. Most people don't think of a SodaStream as a sustainability product, but everyone I know that has one doesn't buy bottled water anymore, doesn't buy, for the most part, even bottled soda.
Right.
They make their own, and that has a huge impact on water use and weight savings, et cetera.
But that's why we started working with them, because I thought I've always been very, for me, designing bottles has always been a very problematic proposition. There's a lot of great work that could be done in designing bottles from a aesthetic standpoint, but you're really sort of condoning in a way a behavior that is a recently invented behavior for commercial purposes, but that really is environmentally shouldn't be part of our future. So we partnered with SodaStream, and one thing we did, for example, that I don't think I've ever talked about in public, but we actually took away all paints out of the product, meaning this is a product that was manufactured, and to be efficient, they would manufacture it in materials that were not too expensive, and then they would paint it, because then it looks perfect, it looks desirable, it's beautiful on shelf. We went in and we basically had to do a lot of arm wrestling with a lot of different people in the company and say, no, instead, we're going to create products that have a beautiful geometry, that use high quality materials, and don't use paint. And that means, you know, we said, well, all the savings you're going to be doing on paintings, just give us 20% of that. But of course, it didn't go for that part. But meaning there is sort of savings. You really have to sort of change the mindset of an entire engineering group, a manufacturing group, or sourcing group. And then you get to a place where you feel that here you have a beautiful product. It's you know, it's got the right materials, and it's not doing that next step that, you know, really is not needed. Which kind of brings me to an idea which is what happens if you don't paint. You know, if you didn't paint cars.
The same thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you look at materials and you find them beautiful, and you're using aluminum for the trucks. And I'm going to throw, you know, probably what 100 people in the company at Ford would say is a very stupid idea. But what about if you used, you know, an inherent way to color the cars that doesn't require paint on top of what is a noble material? Aluminum is a noble, beautiful material. We anodize a lot of things. Anodizing isn't perfect, but that would be, you know, a starting point.
Yeah. No, I think that's something that's very much in our vocabulary, because as we go around, I know that there are products that are self-filmed, you know, with colors and things like that, and even the way we do the interiors, you know, with all the details. And I think that eventually eliminating the paint shop is one of the goals, you know, to create that consistency. As you were talking, I was thinking about Henry Ford. And Henry Ford kind of invented the whole idea of efficiency, and you know, and it really boiled down that he wanted to use every single piece of the car, and even the boxes that the tires were shipped in, and reuse the boxes and make them the floorboards, and any extra wood that was left over to make charcoal briquettes out of, and he was sustainable in the sense that he had the steel mills, and he had the forests, and he had all of that stuff sustaining a workforce that created the original master plan community, and everything was sustainable. And I think that the more that we go from the cradle to grave on a vehicle and get really serious, and I just spent a little bit of time in our science research lab about a month ago, and the scientists there are so excited going through materials and showing even the insulation materials that are in the seats and things like that being made from recycled materials. And so as we go through a car, even every aspect of the car should be, you know, recyclable and reusable and,
you know, Henry
lighter.
Ford was the first to use natural fibers and soy resin, I believe,
Yes.
in the U.S. And this was, you know, a generation ago. And you often wonder what happened to that. And I know that now in agricultural equipment, John Deere, for example, is using that because now their clientele are providing the material for the actual tractors and combines that they're using. And they're using the waste materials like the corn stalks that are left over in the ground afterwards to actually become body panels for this large implementation. And the idea is not new by any means. Obviously, we have new technologies now to apply to it, but the materials science is really fascinating.
Well, even at the dawn of, I think, about 2002 to 2004, the Ford had the concept car, the Model U, which was a full deep dive into sustainable materials and processes, et cetera.
but we actually have areas of even the cars that we're looking at here, the truck and the C-Max, that where the seats are, you know, the foam is made from recycled. A lot of the paneling on the interior is made out of recycled materials. So, and we're looking through every aspect. In the auto industry, it's very different than any other industry. And because the forgiveness of a material to fade or to go bad is at a much higher level than, let's say, that if you were to buy even the latest computer or something like that. Because if you buy a computer and it freezes on you, you're just going to wait until it, you know, unfreezes itself and rebounce it. And on a car, we let this car sit out in the sun for 7 years, and it can't fade, nothing can break inside the interior. It has to be at the highest temperature levels, at the lowest temperature levels in sub-zero. Things that you never do. It's only maybe in some military equipment that you actually do that.
Jordan, you work for a company for whom sustainability and design are strategic initiatives. They're core to the company, Autodesk's values and their strategies. How does that play out in how you make decisions or how you influence and talk with Autodesk customers and the development of Autodesk products?
Yeah, I concur with Yves in that it's really just part of the ethos is that it's 2014, so an intelligent designer can't separate sustainability and design. It's mutually inclusive, and yet we have an entire department dedicated to it. And I think the biggest benefit is that they've just made it part of our entire process. So in the product, so that you can choose when you're selecting materials and you're designing it digitally, you know what the embedded energy is in those materials. That you have lightweighting applications so that you can find new structures that make the vehicle lighter weight. And let's face it, really with all of this, and you pointed to this earlier as well, we can do as much as we can on the design side so that you can choose the right materials that are sustainable so that you can make the vehicle lighter, save energy over the lifespan of whatever it is that you're designing. But it's the behavior of the consumers is what I've been taught from our sustainability team that is the biggest impact. Like we're doing a study now with 3D printers. And it's like, okay, you can use lower energy machines, you can use sustainable materials, but if people just print out a bunch of crap every day and throw it away, it doesn't really matter how sustainable you make the machine. And the same goes for a car. No matter what you do to it, if somebody mistreats it, drives it incorrectly, I know I push on the accelerator a little bit too fast, then you can't control that downstream. So the question is now, how do you influence the psychology of the consumers? And that's where I think design gets really interesting.
Is this thing still on?
Just screen.
Yeah. So if you look at the new F series that's outside, F-150, and you look at the body, and think to yourself, this complete body is made out of military-grade aluminum. And imagine the value of that body later on. Nobody's going to throw that away. They're going to recycle that body. And the thing is also that it's tough and does all the other things that it's supposed to do, and allows the designer, to have a lot of opportunity with the shapes and forms on it as well.
It's just like my MacBook Pro, and in fact, to echo what you suggested, Yves, I'd be very happy if my car matched my MacBook Pro in appearance. Yves, you were going to say something?
Yeah, is that a standard material for the 150, or is that well,
stealing all of them.
No, I gave you one just a second ago.
Microphone hoarder.
So is that the standard material for the 150, or is that a limited?
No, that's standard. So it's all aluminum military grade body on a high strength steel chassis. So it's stronger. It's tougher than it's ever been before, but it's on every single one of them.
Okay. Let me push you in a different area, not just the surface and the paint and the material. So a Herman Miller chair is warranted for 12 years. I don't know what other products that I've ever consumed that's warranted for 12 years. It has to survive people sitting in it and getting up, etc. But the ability to remove those foams, of course we can use low VOC and recyclable foams and whatnot. But why is it that I haven't seen a car with some kind of suspension system, whether it's the Aeron style, whether it's stretched elastomers? How come we haven't seen some of what's quite common now in the way that we expect comfort in cars and vehicles?
I mean, another type of suspension system than what?
Suspension systems that are, either stretched fabrics or.
I think you're talking about the seats.
I'm talking about the seat and the back. Yeah.
Yeah, not the wheel suspension, the body suspension.
No, yes.
Well, we experiment a lot with those internally, and because we call it thin seat technology, and in some cases, we may start to see these in the future, especially when it's really reprogramming the customer visually. It's a big difference between, say, an office chair and something that's inside of, let's say, a truck or a luxury car or something like that. But I think for the right type of vehicle, to start to experiment into this and get into thin seat technology.
So this is more of a customer issue from what I'm hearing from you rather than a technology issue. Meaning you could make the material work, but you're not sure that customers will see that as something that they would get used to or that they would want.
No, I think the customer would, but it's for I think you have to bring it into the right marketplace. As an example, in developing a vehicle, you have visual perceptions of what something is. It's like when you walk into your living room and you have these couches sitting in the back here. Chances are most of you want to sit in that couch instead of on that bench or in the chair, you know. And those of you that are sitting in the chairs up front, I just let you know that those couches are back there and you can actually relax in those things. So I think that it really comes down to a lot of perceptions, but as we get weight out of vehicles, and weight is going to become weight and aerodynamics, and really making the whole vehicle work as a complete whole, you're going to start seeing more of that. We're experimenting with thin seat technology. The thinnest seats actually are, if you look at the Ford GT, and you look at how thin those seats are because they're made on the perfect comfort curve, they've existed for years in race cars and also, you know, sports cars.
I guess when we get self-driving cars, we can have the thinnest seat technology, just have a trampoline in the middle.
I like
people
that.
bouncing around.
Well, and this reminds me of the Aeron chair. You know, the Aeron chair was not a successful chair in the market until the dot-com boom, where a lot of money started pouring into relatively young workers and leaders who wanted to differentiate themselves from the traditional, you know, office boss's chair, which was this big old padded thing. That was a huge culture shift, and it sounds like what you're saying, suggesting, Freeman, is the same culture shift has to happen within a certain car buying public for a certain car.
Well, I think that there's such a bandwidth of opportunity out there. There's just in seating, you know, for the home or the office, you have everything from an how do you pronounce it? Aeron chair all the way through an Eames chair, you know, and you know, I'll take the Eames chair, but you know,
I'll take the trampoline. I really like what I'm hearing from all of you about sustainability is no longer a big issue. It's just something you build in, and it's sort of by a foregone conclusion that you'll be thinking about improving products in this way, the same way that we, as designers, always thought about improving products in other ways. So what should designers be thinking about now? If sustainability is sort of already inclusive, what should designers here and all over the world be thinking about that might be new to them?
Can I start on that one?
Please.
So I have a pretty strong conviction about this, that the face of design is going to be changing dramatically in the next decade through computation. And that we have computational tools coming out now that can explore design spaces that humans couldn't explore. And example of the chair is a good one, that we have preconceived notions about what something should be. A machine doesn't, has no idea what something should be. And what that means for a designer is that the designer focuses on asking the right questions, that you constrain the problem and define the parameters in which a machine can grow a solution. And it can grow billions of iterations of that solution and find the optimals. The thing is, that solution's only going to be as good as the questions that you asked. So I think that design education as a whole is going to be focusing more on fully understanding the problem and constraining the problem as well as you can. Now, having gone to architecture school, I know that sometimes you don't know the whole problem until you start designing. So it's an iterative process. I'm not saying that you feed the machine the question and it gives you an answer. There's very much an iterative and really an augmentation that happens, but I think that that's going to change the entire process in a very dramatic way.
And to be clear, I hear you're not saying that the machine is making the decision, but it's replicating lots of options that
it's trying out
might.
So many options, things that were not even, you know, you think of cloud computing and literally going through billions of permutations of design options.
Okay, designers,
so
what do you say to that?
I agree with those statements, but with a caveat, you know, see, I think that us being humans, we endear towards certain types of objects, houses, architecture, vehicles, things like that. And I think that, you know, it's like creating a good story or a movie. You have to have a screenplay. You have to know what the story is. And I think this is what What reverse engineering, looking at something, I like to start with, how do I want to sit inside of it? What do I want to be looking at? If you just do an experiment and you play with your head height and you go up and down, and you're going to find the sweet spot of where you want to sit on the road. And that's one of the reasons why things like the C-Max and even the F-150 are becoming popular, because we like sitting up a little bit higher. We like our heads being not down on the ground. We like them up here somewhere. So you start with how you want to feel. I think that technology and digital computations and the computer and all of that is just going to enhance opportunities and selection. But at the same time, beauty is something, and something that becomes endearing, and you want to love it and you don't want to throw it away, like that Eames chair. You want something that, or the Herman Miller, it just goes on. So creating those objects is something that still takes that human endeavor.
Yeah, the day a computer creates a great screenplay, we can all go home. We're done, right? But
I thought they were already. There's been a few movies out that I think that were probably computer-driven screenplays.
No, those two sadly are made by humans.
But luckily for us, I don't think that day is very close. So we can all keep working on beautiful stories, and we can certainly test designs on the computer. But for me, what makes a huge difference is combining the notion of ideas and stories in order to put designs out there that are going to really transform the way our perceptions are of the world around us. And my favorite, the reason why I get up in the morning is because I believe that what really design does, what really good design does, is it moves ideas forward. It moves the important 21st century ideas forward, such as sustainability is important, or is going to be a big part of our future. If it wasn't realized in a way that is beautiful and understandable and desirable from the consumer, that dies. So, what design does is it accelerates the adoption of new ideas, such as, for example, a lightweight, suspension type seat in a car, whether it's an Eames one. Eames actually did create some suspension, back in the day, some suspension materials that were fully transparent, as well as thin seats on the aluminum group chairs. But this is mostly what I'm sensing in my experience is the reason why these solutions are not adopted yet is essentially because we're not convincing people that it's luxurious enough or exciting enough or part of the environment that they want to drive in, right?
Well, I think the way my mind thinks, and I've been quoted before as looking at design like a chessboard. And I always look at, if you do this, what happens here and what happens here. So you go to, let's say, a mesh type see-through seat, then I always think, if you have people in the back seat and you're not in an office. If you're in an accident, all of a sudden they're going to be pushed forward. There's no structure behind. They're going to be pushed right into you. So I have to think, okay, what do you do in that instance? So to me, that's thinking dimensionally about every last thing about what happens in a situation.
Right, but you could have a hard shell and a suspension. Suspension is there for comfort, not for looks. Right. And you could have a shell, a very thin shell.
Sounds like you really want to design some suspension.
Well, no, I'm just what I love to do in my work is kind of find out what are the resisting points to change, and then design something either beautiful or create a beautiful story. Yeah. A beautiful screenplay on how you create that adoption, how you drive that adoption, how you get to people to, change their mind and to say to you, I never thought this would work, but now I couldn't live without it.
But see, I think that, again, the way my mind is thinking is that I start going through a vehicle and how to eliminate parts. And if I can make the seat part of the structure of the car, if I can make take the wheels and the brakes and the hubs and all of that one unit, if I can make, and that's really way Henry Ford started to think about the car, because with the assembly line, he started to look at how fast he could build the car at a create a high quality car, bring the price down, and at the same time create this beautiful object. And I think if we go through time and we look at cars like, say, a 2CV Citroen, beautiful, because it's basically this very thin webbed seat, and you can take the seats out and you can do a picnic with it, and you can roll the roof back and do all these things, and there's one little shock absorber on the side for the front and rear wheels.
One of my favorite cars as well.
Yeah, and I think this is where designers love to think. We love to think about minimalism and how to make, one thing do two things. And I think that we're all on the same wavelength when it comes to this.
So where are those influences coming? What are the things that we should be thinking about or that are going to affect our thinking, whether it's coming from materials or processes or culture?
I think now is the most beautiful age for designers, because precisely the issue that you brought up, how do you conflate assemblies? How do you reduce parts? How do you rethink the way things are made? All of this is getting turned on its head now. Whether it's small companies who are building cars now, or whether it's people who are printing things in their own home, the entire process of design and manufacturing is changing dramatically, and designers are in a position to take advantage of that. Who else is better to think about how do you combine and integrate brakes into wheels, into power generation systems, into one component that could be printed, right? And in every industry right now, aerospace, automotive, architecture, everyone is thinking about how can I reduce the number of parts and simplify this process.
But it's the hardest thing to do, as probably most of the people here know. Going minimal is the hardest thing to do, because when you look at the cost of an object, a seat, something, and you look at, it's made of 10 parts that are each $1 a part, right? And it's like, okay, I want to eliminate 6 of these parts or 7 of these parts. I have to invest into an extremely expensive tool and set of materials and research in order to do something that maybe when it's all combined, maybe that cost will go down. So actually you need to have the alignment of people who do the capital investments in the business, who will say, yes, we will invest $1 million now. We will get $3
or
back.
Or $1 billion.
Or $1 billion.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be reasonable.
Not scaring people off.
And get $3 back down the line, but also, build a story, build a brand, build a great design. But without our work, what I'm saying is, it's really our responsibility as designers, because without our work and the vision of how beautiful that part could be, the combination of 3 or 4 parts that reduces cost down the line, and how that's going to be a competitive advantage, how it's going to be something that people want, that's, investment will never get made.
Well, everything you're discussing, and I think a great example of this is Apple. Their products, they've invested billions of dollars into entirely new manufacturing techniques, which have transformed whole industries. If you look at aluminum, for instance, and the supply chain around aluminum now is completely transformed because of what Apple drove through its aluminum unibody, manufacturing process, and now they're doing the same with Sapphire. That does take a huge amount of capital investment. How do designers show up and convince leaders of companies, whether they're clients or the companies that we work in, how do we make the case for the value of that?
I have to say that the biggest difference between, let's say, a company like Apple creating a computer and a company like Ford creating an automobile is that the automobile is far more accountable than a computer. Imagine, these cars now, this car can perform better than a 1950s Ferrari. I mean, acceleration, top speed, handling, everything else. And you expect nothing to go wrong, and in an accident, you're going to survive. It's a 5-star. Nothing will fall off on the car. Everything has to work perfect every time, in every type of heat, every type of climate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when we go about designing a vehicle, we have certain goals as designers. We want to make it as compact as possible. We want to make it as roomy. We want to make it as beautiful. Proportion is a big thing for us. But at the same time, the company, even though it wants to make the most profit out of it, it has internal standards. And those standards take priority over anything. The new F-Series truck, its standard is that it's got to be the best truck in the world. Bar none. It has to be the best at everything that it does, bar none. Trailer tow, durability, driving dirt roads. You know, you go and you see that truck in 10 years of hard use, it's still around. And so it really is a different type of a standard in what we expect from other objects.
I wanted to ask another question before we open it up to the whole audience. And this was something that came up on the phone when we initially talked. Jordan, you brought up the changes that are happening sort of on the quantitative side in tools and processes and quantitative computation. The other part, the qualitative part, which I think is where many of us as designers sort of anchor the pride we have in the things that we create, because they have such a huge impact on the relationships created between that object, that service, that whatever, and our customers. The tip-top point of that to me is essentially when designers create things that have meaning to people, whether it's to a customer or a user, et cetera. And I've written books on meaning, so it's obviously important to me too, but it comes out in the design press and design criticism. How do designers create meaning, and how does that shape the kinds of, shape your design process?
Let the users create their own meaning. I mean, the tools and capabilities are out there now that people can have their own hand in the design, and nothing is more valuable to a person than something that they took part of.
For some things, sure, but certainly not for everything yet. People don't make their own cars on a regular basis.
Well, not everybody's going to make their own art, write their own books, make their own films. Luckily, we're going to rely a little bit on each other's hard work and imagination for things as well. So, my sense is like meaning is really created through dialogue, but it's also through intent and sort of the original idea. So I'll tell you, that one product many years ago, that's why I'm excited to meet with Freeman tonight, had meaning for me when it was shown as a concept car, the Audi TT. And it took about 5 years, I think, for the product from when it was shown as a show car, as a concept car to come out. And it was almost identical to the final product when it came out. And the same ideas survived from concept car to production car. This is a fight that we have, every day in our lives as designers. We create concepts, people love them, and then we have to sweat through, the process of bringing them out. But there was an idea that I could capture, and I do believe that storytelling is sort of central to design as well. And keeping that story intact through the incredible process of industrialization, with every safety and regulation and reliability that comes in hand, is just, it's truly heroic work. Like half the time, when we're in the office, I'm like, well, I could go home right now, really. I could go home and kind of, do something else. The reason why I'm there and still trying to make something happen with the original idea is not because I get paid more to do so, but because I do think it's at the very center of the success and the building of the companies that we're working with.
Freeman, just because of what Yves, you shared an example, I was going to ask each of you, Freeman, what's an example of a meaningful piece of design that you did not create or have a hand in creating that resonates for you to this day?
Well, for me, it's the Porsche 356. And the reason is that I love design that visually and functionally explains itself, and it's beautiful as an object. So when I look at the first Porsche 356, it was designed as a aerodynamic teardrop shape, and it was designed to have the two people in front as the priority, and it happened to have little jump seats in the back that you could either put luggage or you could put your stuff in there. And it only started off with a very small motor, 1100, 1300, and then 1600 cc's, and it doesn't take a lot of energy to move this object down the road, up to 100 miles an hour. And it's quiet, and it's refined. And to me, this design has been really inspiring because I love small cars, love lightweight cars. These, a Porsche 356 only weighs between about 1,800 pounds and 2,000 pounds, depending on what model it is. And as we go about the future right now, and this is a car that was designed by engineers that had an amazing aesthetic sense. And to me, those are the heroes. When I look at, I was just talking about Yves a little bit about, some of the inspirations of designers like Kelly Johnson developing aircraft, everything from, P-38 Lightning all the way to the Blackbird, Super Constellation, all of those gorgeous airplanes. But visually communicating, who wouldn't want to go on a trip on a Super Connie? It just sort of visually connects you to the experience. And I think that's what we strive for in design, is that to communicate the experience through the language of the object. And you're not disappointed.
Jordan,
I think this helps to underline what I firmly believe in, that the new heroes of design are going to be through democratization, because since the Industrial Revolution, basically all consumers have relied on industrialized countries for the products that they consume, the mass-produced products that they consume. So sub-Saharan Africa has relied on Maytag engineers to design and produce refrigerators that work for them. And frankly, we don't know shit about what sub-Saharan Africa needs for refrigeration or for cars or for transport, we should say mobility. And this is where I think the democratization is really the new revolution, because now all markets, all people, why is New York consuming the same stuff as San Francisco? I've been here for 9 months, and I went back for Fashion Week, and I was thinking, what relevance does Fashion Week in New York have in San Francisco when they're in scarves and I'm in shorts? And that's what's really interesting, is now people can design for themselves. They can design for their communities. They can actually manufacture for themselves as well. Now, no, they're not going to produce a car in their garage necessarily. Some people do. But it's all those little things that we cannot predict the need for all communities everywhere, no matter how good of a designer you are. So it's interesting when people can actually ascertain that, ask the problems themselves, and solve it.
And you've had a really good point, though. We've had, you can go to any art store in the world and buy paints. It doesn't mean you're going to paint a beautiful painting, even a beautiful painting to yourself. So how do we as designers help people, if more people are going to be creating things themselves, how do we help them create things that are more satisfying to them?
Well, everyone has defined a problem that bugs them, whether or not it's getting water to their house or it's making their shoes more comfortable. So everyone can define a problem, and agreed, not everyone's a designer, not everyone's an artist, but a lot of it ain't rocket science, to be honest.
Okay, questions from the audience? Anyone? Or from online? Yes?
Talking about innovation and the Ford F-150, making it out of aluminum is kind of like putting a filter on a cigarette. Why isn't it a brand new design that's really space efficient, really innovative in doing what a pickup does, instead of this Harley Davidson for suburban cowboys?
Sounds like there's not a right answer for you.
Exactly. It sounds like not the customer you were designing for.
Yeah. Well, I think that the market that the F-150 sits within is really defined by the customer. And the team that developed that truck did a lot of research with the customer on that truck, and they feel they have the right answer.
I think that Ford and Autodesk need to get together to build the tools so that you can do the body design that you like and then get it manufactured and put into place somewhere. We have a question from online from Alan Colehemp. What qualitative research techniques have been most helpful in driving insights that lead to lasting design advances?
Being there. Of course we practice a few different forms of research, but for me, being, really experiencing either somebody using the product or having my team be there and experience it for ourselves is critical. We can't really take those inputs and turn them into designs, though. It does take just imagination and foresight. I mean, what I often say is that, we really try to tap into what people have not expressed, what they would dream of having as an experience, and yet don't know how to truly verbalize because that's simply not what we're, it's simply not their job. And that's the same thing that Steve Jobs said, which is, you can test all you want, the answers are still going to have to come from, the design, engineering, innovation, entrepreneurial side of things.
Well, and I think that, and to Jordan's point, these are the techniques that help you understand what the question is in the first place that you're trying to answer. So you can't be at every research, you can't be with your team for all the research, and not all your clients can be with you and with the team. What are the best ways of translating what they find in context because they're there to the people that end up making the decisions in such a way that the best part, the most meaningful part of defining what the problem or the need is communicated? So
in my opinion, you can of course film things and have forms and use statistical data, etc. But when I say being there, it doesn't matter whether it's me or somebody on my team or somebody on a client team. I truly believe that an integrated approach to design, meaning having a horizontal version of sort of input with people, it doesn't matter whether they're graphic designers or in brand and identity or in engineering or in strategy, they are part of, all of that work is done in parallel, so those inputs aren't lost, meaning they don't sit in a report. There may be a report, but they don't sit in a report detached from the process, distanced from the process. Everything is in the same place. In fact, in our office, every wall, what we need are more walls, because the walls contain all of the information, and the information never goes away. It can't really be ignored, can't really be put aside. And so this, to me, that's key. And when I say being there, it doesn't mean that I have to be there, but anybody, people have to be exposed to the same information.
And I'll add to that because I agree. Actually being at a research event and watching and looking at responses and then at the same time being able to feed questions to the moderator is really helpful. The best type of research for a designer to be in, though, I think, is when you are showing a vehicle that is based off of your intuition. And something is very advanced and it's got a lot of reach and a lot of stretch and it's right on the line. And from that, you're emotionally involved in the whole process. And I think that's really where you learn a lot, because sometimes your intuition can be off, but it's great when it's on.
I'm surprised nobody's talked about the role of technology in that you can get the feedback from the products that you design. So you're actually designing the feedback mechanism into the product itself to figure out how somebody uses it, how somebody wears it. Maybe my pants should be thicker on the right leg because I cross my left leg over my right, and the next generation of pants that I get created for me might know that, whereas a designer is not going to be able to know that. So that the ability for everything that we consume and interface with to actually have that integrated feedback mechanism is something where designers almost now have an obligation to design those systems into the products so that they can react to the individual.
That's actually something that's really interesting. We have never seen the kind of, customer user involvement in feedback of products that they're using before. And what you're talking about, Jordan, are products that are automatically sending that kind of data back in real time. For instance, Rolls-Royce doesn't sell engines to airlines anymore. They lease them by the mile, or by the kilometer, and those engines are constantly sending information back to Rolls-Royce in their service center simultaneously in the moment. Where does that give, what kind of design tool does that turn into for us designers to be informed about use and opinion and any other kind of data from action?
So I love the notion of the industrial internet, which is, I think, what you're referring to. I love the notion of data that really allows products to interact with us in a very personal way, 24/7.
You're wearing one.
You know, this is one of them. I think all that is correct, but I think all that is still only a portion of the equation. You know, how something makes me feel, how something physically feels on me. I don't know that this is something that is just input-output type of sort of computerized, you know, process. I think there is a lot of feelings, there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of perception that you know, still, you know, that still is going to continue to happen on a very sort of human level. And I do think that that's where, you know, intuition, you know, whether it's missed or successful intuition doesn't matter. That's going to be still a really big part of our work. And honestly, I mean, I've been, you know, as designers, you know, the whole sort of trend towards stereolithography and other, you know, 3D printing is very, very sweet and very cute, but we've been using these for like, you know, 15, 20 years. We used to buy these things and they were, you know, $250,000, yeah. You know, and when I was working for other people. So, you know, it's great that it's getting used everywhere and that we're all fantasizing about making our own stuff, but you know, I still believe that we're going to rely on, it's going to be a complementary, but efficiency isn't, you know, just thinking about individual making. You know, all of us building their own homes isn't the most efficient way of living. We all know that New York City is a lot more efficient than Los Angeles, and even more, you know, a lot more efficient than San Francisco for a reason, which is the industrialization of living, essentially, in high-rise buildings. So, you know, I think it's you know, it's not a collision course at all. It's a parallel course. Yeah. It's, you know, better data, more individualized feedback, but it's not, you know, it's not dystopian. You know, yeah. I think it's not dystopian in the sense that the human is detached from.
Well, I don't think anyone's saying that either.
From the experience.
I think that you know, it's incredible and miraculous the kind of progress we've made on the quantitative side in terms of sensing and processing this kind of data, but the qualitative side of the relationship you have with your, you know, people have with products and services, whatever, that we have not made as much progress. We don't know how to capture emotions or values or meaning very well, let alone sense them, process them, understand them, and then make them available. I mean, that's got a lot of more work to go, I think.
It's still a human endeavor. You know, just because you can buy the ingredients for a meal or you can buy instruments doesn't mean you're going to create fantastic music and create a great meal. You know, that it's the designer is the processor, and a lot of times we listen for adjectives and metaphors and we paint pictures with those adjectives or metaphors. You know, you say the word tough, or you say the word refined, or you say the word futuristic, or you say the word, you know, retro or vintage, or, you know, and every designer will paint a different picture using those words. And I think that the magic comes from how that designer, a specific designer, can process all that data, all that information, and put it into the package and make something that's magic. And when something's magic, then it's like, it's magic. It just is. It just is.
And I think that that's not going to change for the the top 10% of products and architecture that are designed by a good designer. You're not going to replace that. The problem is most of the stuff that's designed and made is shit. Over 90% of buildings in the U.S. never had an architect touch it. So where the role for the design automation to come in is for all this stuff where a human designer, or at least a good human designer, does not interact with it.
So it's getting worse, though. It's not getting better. 20 years ago, 20% of buildings, this is not me, this is a talk last night from Craig Dykers, but 20% of buildings were built by like 12 to 15% were designed by architects, and today it's down to 2%. So, we have to go back to more architects building buildings versus...
No, we have to go to architects providing more value, because then that would drive the people developing it. If people valued those buildings like a Guggenheim that reinvigorated Bilbao, reinvigorated an economy, that provided value. That was immediate and transparent.
I think that you're actually both right, because I'd say 1% of those buildings that were half of the ones designed by architects don't work for the people who live or work in them, like the Federal Building just a couple blocks away.
It's pretty, though.
It's not that pretty, anyway. Okay, I want to ask one last question from the audience. This is the first. We're almost out of time.
All the comments so far have been really about market forces, and also aesthetic, design of people having an idea and pursuing that. But I'm wondering where you see the role of regulation and government kind of representing societal values, forcing design. I mean, in the automotive industry, you guys have had to deal with that a hell of a lot for the last 40 years around safety and efficiency. But, what is the role of that? I used to be in energy efficiency, and we pushed all these compact fluorescents, and in a few months, those horrible torchieres lamps that were so popular burned up every, energy savings we had for the last year. So, where does regulation come in to drive design?
Well, obviously regulation is a lot slower than innovation. So to go back to our innovation subject, there's a few amazing startups in San Francisco that are battling this. Uber, Airbnb. If you build anything and it disrupts sort of any kind of existing idea, you're gonna, more than actually running into the lack of adoption from people, you're going to actually hit regulation. I've experienced it where I've had to build, this chair, the sail chair for Herman Miller, and it has to be built at the same time with 5 different continental regulations in place. The worst of all isn't Germany, it's actually Australia. And yet you're trying to do something innovative, right? And so whether it's the business model, whether it's the distribution model, whether it's the engineering and design, the structural, whether it's how people live with it, regulation has, in many ways kind of drives and constrains us, but it doesn't mean that's the end of it. I mean, I think we keep pushing those.
Yeah. The problem's only going to get worse. You think about whether or not it's people making their own stuff, but obviously customization is becoming the norm. Beyond that, personalization. So every product is unique in a little different way. How do you develop standards around every product being unique? The entire standards body, ISO, ASTM, were built around mass production, the idea that everything is the exact same. So and you think about now materials being bespoke for their purpose, how do you have a standard for a non-standard material? It's going to be a huge challenge.
Yeah. So some of the most difficult issues that we have in the automotive industry are not a set of standards. It just happens to be that almost every country and almost every state has their own individual unique standards. And so when we create a vehicle, for instance, just the headlights, the headlights are different in a lot of different countries because of unique standards. Not about performance, it's that there's a bureaucrat that has created a set of standards for that. But we have to, as designers, look at these like the elephant in the room, and we have to look at what the business case is for each country, each market that we go into, and we look at commonizing as much of the parts as we can, so global car. And when I look at the front of this car, I can see where, I can see the pedestrian impact zones, I can look at all of those, but I can also look at every single car that's out there and look at the unique ways that they've been challenged and made. Some are better than others, but so far it hasn't stopped us from making a beautiful automobile. And it's really about the relationship that we have with our engineers so that we can tackle them head on. But it's everywhere on the car, but it takes the most flexible and creative minds to get them.
So there is an awesome design opportunity for you to go out and design a better, more responsive regulatory system that responds to innovation better. It's a project I'll have to give my students.
Yeah, and I've always said in past panel discussions that it is easier to get approval to go up into space, create your own rocket and go into space than it is to create your own car. And it's a whole different set of standards.
So since the two of you failed my meaningful product question, because the correct answer was the Concorde, by the way, I'm going to ask you just one last question because we're out of time. What's the best or the biggest opportunity for designers today? Defined however you want to define it. Freeman?
I think the best opportunity is to fail forward. It's really not being afraid of failing and looking at opportunity out of just keep moving and working and keeping your hands dirty and just looking at the opportunity of creating these objects.
Yves?
I think the best opportunity for design as a profession right now is to essentially create your own business model, to create your own product, to create your own industry. There is an appetite in the consumer. There is an appetite in the world today for change, whether it's hotels or cars or all the things we experience here every day, and there is backing for it. And as a designer, you actually are credible today, which we do have to thank Steve Jobs for that.
Yep.
But we are credible as builders of business and builders of industry, which hasn't happened in quite a while. So I do think that's a tremendous opportunity that we need to capture and deliver on. So the next generation of designers won't be disappointed in the way that we have capitalized on that opportunity.
Probably not since Raymond Loewy and Walter Dorman Teague, in fact.
I agree.
Yeah. Jordan, you have the next to last word.
I concur that designer is in a very, very good position. I love the fact that designer has been referenced in the generic of all disciplines of design, and I think that will hold true. I would encourage designers to engage in the way things are made. The manufacturing industries, engineering is desperate to find how to leverage new technologies to basically start from a blank sheet. Engineers are already indoctrinated with the way that things are made. You can just see it in the way things are designed. You can see draft angles, you can see fillets, I see bolts and welds. We don't need that stuff anymore. So designers are the ones who are going to come up with the best way to make things.
Great.
Can I just add one thing? Because I think that designers are also the best bridge builders in an organization because they have opportunity. They see what's going on in engineering. They see what's going on in marketing. They see what's going on in planning. They see what's going on in manufacturing. And I think that designers ultimately have the vision, and it's up to them to sort of hold their hand and walk them through and teach them, what could be and what ifs.
Value both the qual and the quant. Okay, we're out of time. We're a little bit over. Thank you all for coming. The bar will be open after this, and these cars are here. They're only here tonight, so if you want to take the opportunity, sit in them, talk to the Ford folks about them. Thank you to Brandon and the IDSA for setting up this event, and thank you, Ford, for sponsoring it and bringing the cool cars, as well as Freeman. For those of you online on Core 77, I'm sure there's a bar open somewhere, so you can go drink as well. And thank you all for coming.